I think, maybe we'll start the session and I can keep bringing people in as we go along. So I'd like to welcome everyone today. My name's Natalie Lowry. I'm the Communications Coordinator of the Deep Sea Mining Campaign. I'm currently in Naarm, or we know as Melbourne, and I want to acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people, who are the traditional owners and the custodians of the land that I'm on, and to recognise their continuing connection to land, water and culture. And I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and recognise that sovereignty was never ceded in the so-called land Australia. So today I welcome you to a discussion on what we're calling the Blue Peril, which is around the issue of seabed mining in the Pacific. And joining us today is Dr. Helen Rosenbaum, my colleague, who's the coordinator of the Deep Sea Mining Campaign. The deep sea mining in the Pacific is of growing interest to frontier investors, mining companies and some island economies. But to date, there's no commercial operations that have been established, but much of the seabed mineral exploration is occurring. So just to set the kind of context, there's currently more than 1.5 million square kilometres of the Pacific Ocean under exploration leasehold. So from this point, I'm actually going to throw over to Dr. Helen Rosenbaum, who unfortunately is on the call, but is unable to really use video. So we have a pre-record presentation. It goes for about 10 minutes. And this just sort of lays a bit of the science context and the potential environmental, economic and social impacts of deep sea mining if it goes ahead. The presentation talks to a joint report produced by the Deep Sea Mining Campaign and Mining Watch Canada with the support of Oceania Dialogue that was released in May this year. Following that presentation, I'm going to throw over to Tita and Jonathan to introduce themselves, and we'll just sort of go into a bit of a conversation about their cultural context and what deep sea mining means in the Pacific. So just bear with me while I share the screen, and I will put on Helen's presentation.
Just before I launch into presenting the key findings of our report, what I'd like to do is introduce our campaign. We're the Deep Sea Mining Campaign. We're an association of individuals and organisations from around the world who are very concerned about this emerging and unprecedented industry of seabed mining and the impacts it would have on ecosystems and on the livelihoods of communities should this industry proceed. We pride ourselves on evidence-based advocacy, and this report is the 7th that we've produced over the 10 years that we've existed. And the reason for our existence are in fact the coastal and island communities whose way of life and livelihoods are at stake here. I was very privileged to travel to Duke of York Islands, one of those communities, a few years ago, and I was able to see firsthand the very close connection that these communities have with the marine environment. And I include this slide just by way of illustrating this. This young fella and his family who I met there was so familiar and so connected to the dolphin pod that regularly visited their bay every morning that when one of them died, they gave it a full funeral and buried it next to their own house. And this is the plaque that they've set up to commemorate the mammal who beautified their bay. We believe a moratorium on deep sea mining is the only responsible way forward, both in national and international waters. There was simply not enough known about the biodiversity of the deep sea, and this is something that our report emphasises as well. We don't know how the deep sea really relates to wider marine ecosystems, although science is slowly catching up to what Pacific Islanders have always known, that the ocean is one vast interconnected space, and the deep sea is connected to the higher levels of water, to the coastal waters, to the reefs. We don't know how the impacts of seabed mining might affect all of these ecosystems, and how it might affect the food chains that all of us rely on. One aspect we really don't know very much about are the methods that the mining companies are intending to use. We don't really know very much about the equipment and the machinery and therefore the impacts that these will have. And most importantly, we know very little about how they intend to deal with their waste, their mining waste, and I'll refer to that a little bit later on. However, what is known and what our report finds as the scientific consensus from the 250 articles that it reviews is that the impacts will be extensive, severe, and will last for generations. Effectively, in human time frames, we will see the irreversible loss of species in the deep sea and the ecosystems that support them. And there's a very real risk that marine species more widely and marine ecosystems more widely will be badly affected too. The report also finds that the social and economic gains that are promoted by the companies and their investors to the countries that have been sponsoring them to mine the seafloor or to explore at this stage the seafloor, that those claims are at this point in time unsubstantiated and based on conjecture. This is an experimental industry. No one will know whether those claims actually bear fruit until after seabed mining occurs. And by that time, it could be too late for the ecosystems and for the communities who rely on those ecosystems. The reason that our partners, Mining Watch Canada and ourselves, commissioned the report is this. The Clarion-Clipperton Zone. This is a map of the Clarion-Clipperton Zone, which I'll refer to as the CCZ. This map is produced by the International Seabed Authority and shows the exploration licenses that it's already let to about 16 different entities from all around the world. And our report lists all these companies and consortium and government enterprises. The Clarion-Clipperton Zone is this vast expanse of ocean. It stretches 4,500 kilometres from Kiribati to Mexico. And as you can see here, it's a patchwork of exploration leaseholds already. Most of the world doesn't even know that this is happening yet. The exploration leaseholds cover a bandwidth of about 1,000 kilometres. So here in this area, we've got a few million square kilometres currently under exploration leasehold. What the mining companies are attracted to are the nodules on the bottom of the sea floor. These cannonball kind of size, lumpy rocks contain combinations of metals. And the mining companies like to present their schema of collecting the nodules as a very sanitised vacuuming up of these rocks without any impact on the seafloor. And in fact, they like to present the seafloor as a dead zone. There's nothing down here, there's nothing to see, just a lump of rocks. But in fact, what we know, as more research is being conducted, and there is still a paucity of research on the seabed floor of the CCZ, what we know is that the nodules provide a service in their ecosystem. They provide hard surfaces to which organisms who are immobile can adhere. They also provide foraging and spawning grounds for other weird and wonderful life forms that exist down on the sea floor. The nodules take millions of years to form. One of the areas of uncertainty relates, as I mentioned before, to equipment. This company, GSR from Belgium, is the only company really that's revealed the kind of machinery it plans to use, and this is a prototype that it's testing in the sea floor. I think even the uninitiated, non-engineering type person, non-seabed ecologist, could look at this machine and know that it's not going to have a light footprint on the soupy mud of the sea floor. As it moves, it's going to be compacting immensely the soft mud and the organisms that live in that soft mud. And it's going to be generating plumes of sediment, clouds of sediment. That at this point in time, we don't know what metals will be carried in that sediment. We don't know how long that sediment will travel before it settles. The fine grains of the mud on the sea floor have been estimated to be able to travel for 1,000 kilometres. Because of the plumes that will be generated at the sea floor, and also through the discharge of mine waste, the schema presented by most mining companies would show these kinds of remotely operated vehicles gathering up nodules, transporting them to a pipe that will pipe it up to the surface. That could be the sea floor where they're planning to mine is 3.5 to 6 kilometres under the ocean. It's hard to imagine a pipe that won't be subject to breakage and leakage and slurry leaking out of that. But this thick slurry containing the nodules will be piped up, according to their schema, to a vessel at the surface that will do some initial processing and then discharge wastewater, which will be heavily laden with sediment, back into the ocean. So for the life of the mine, and we don't know exactly how long that would be, it could be around 20 years, there will be a constant plume of sediment. That sediment could contain heavy metals, it could contain toxicants from the chemical processing agents, and it could affect all sorts of animals that use the CCZ as a migratory zone. So we're not talking only about damage on the seabed, but for marine ecosystems more widely. And here we have a slide of the iconic whale shark, which uses the CCZ to migrate through. And our report actually case studies several animals that are deep diving animals as well as migratory animals, and what's known about their migratory routes to highlight the impacts that animals already listed as vulnerable to extinction could experience as a result of seabed mining. So the stakes are really high here. Whether we're talking about local livelihoods for coastal communities, whether we're talking about the Pacific tuna industry worth $6 billion US dollars a couple of years ago, whether we're talking about tourism, which unfortunately, of course, has had to halt for this period during COVID, but will recover and has great opportunity to develop and expand. These are the stakes we're talking about for coastal communities. But all of us will be affected by seabed mining. We're all connected to the services that the deep sea and marine and the oceans provide for us. Not just food, but in terms of energy cycling, carbon cycling. And we just don't know even what seabed mining might do to exacerbate climate change at this stage. It's postulated that the deep sea bed actually stores carbon. Some of the mining companies, and again, I come back to Deep Green, like to present themselves as an eco-warrior that's going to save the planet from carbon, a desperate carbon climate change future, and provide the minerals for a carbon-free future. However, I'll leave you with this comment from Deep Green's CEO himself, Jared Barron. Whether you invest in a company like Deep Green or not, everyone is a sucker for the story. I leave for you to judge what their true motivations are. So I'd like to end here again saying that a moratorium on deep sea mining is the only responsible way forward.